Hey, Fly Fishing Insiders, we are here with Togen's Fly Shop, and Justin and Stanton are back. Hey guys, what's up?
Hey Greg. Hi Greg, how you doing?
Great. Justin, what's new for Togen's in 21?
For 2021, we've come up with a full line of Togen's tools, starting with our all-purpose scissors up to our tungsten carbide series, along with ceramic bobbins, aqua pliers, and just everything you need to get started tying.
And Stanton, as a pro team tyer, how does this benefit people?
Well, these are really high quality tools. The scissors are ultra sharp, able to cut threads, cut wires, get your thread right close to the fly, like on a small chironomid, like a size 18 or even a 20. I'm really enjoying one particular product. I'm really enjoying is the hackle pliers. They have a fantastic grip. I use them to tie to quilled flies on nymphs and or hackle. They're fantastic with various types of different hackle. They really hold the hackle really well. I think people are really going to enjoy them.
Perfect. And Justin, where can we find these tools?
You can find the full collection of tools on our website at togensflyshop.com.
Excellent. Let's get back to the show. Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Keenan. This is Season 3 of the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. In this episode, we aim to bring you the biggest and best stories from those who work and make our fly fishing industry truly great. The Fly Fishing Insider Podcast dives deep into the past, present, and future of all our guests, uncovering their amazing stories and journey. Join us each week as we interview a new podcast guest. Also, if you're new to the show or not yet a subscriber, make sure you hit subscribe after this episode. Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Today our guest, myself and Christian Picasa. Hey Christian, how's it going?
It's going really well, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, buddy. No worries. I'm excited. I'm pretty emotional today, actually. I got to be honest with everybody out there. I'm super emotional. This is a huge day in the Fly Fishing Insider history of kind of what's going on, past, present, future, and everything that's coming around here. So I really, emotionally, I feel like we should just jump right into it. So, Christian, why don't you tell everyone what's been going on here between me and you for a while here?
Yeah, sure. It is. It's an emotional day. I'm sure a different emotion for you than me. But yeah, you and I've known each other 3-4 years now. What? Right? That's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in that 3-4 years, we've worked on a number of different kind of campaign, marketing ideas, just trade ideas, thoughts, etc. And it's been, from my perspective, a fantastic relationship. We always can get a hold of each other. It seems like we talk to each other 3-4 times a week and run ideas and business ideas past each other, etc. And, you expressed to me, I don't know, a couple months ago, gosh, I'm starting to run into a wall and I'm not spending enough time with my family and et cetera, et cetera. And I proposed to you, hey, I'd be really interested in taking over the podcast if you're wanting to move on and kind of focus on family and other things. And here we are, right?
Here we are. Yeah, absolutely. We have done that. So, it's kind of crazy. So yeah, I mean, so really what we're saying here is you've acquired the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. So it is really cool. And, when I was fishing out the podcast to other people, one of the biggest things were there was a couple of people that were interested in acquiring the podcast. And, we went with you because of A, our relationship, and B, I know your connection to the industry. I know your heart's in it. I know, what I mean? You're going to carry on as a legend of the podcast in a great way, in a positive way that it was designed for. And you guys, obviously you have your own spin on how things are going to go, and we're going to get into like what guests can expect and stuff like that going forward. But I think, you're the man for the job. So there you are. I'm stoked about that. And I can't wait to see what you do. So with that said, what is the direction that you do want to take this program into?
Yeah, that's great, man. I really appreciate the comment because, I know I was in the lineup of guys being considered, and it was really cool to hear your personal comments about our relationship and your belief in me and being able to carry on the podcast and really help it grow and mature over time with some different perspectives. So what can the fans expect? Really, at the start, I would say let's focus on three areas. You can effectively expect a passing of the baton. We're going to continue to have great interviews and great guests. And the format is going to stay relatively the same. We're going to try and improve on it as we can. So we'll be asking the fans for feedback. So that's going to be a big component of that development. And I give you some examples, Greg. I mean, you know this, but maybe the fans don't. But with Dupafish, I've worked with over 75 different brand logos in the fishing industry alone directly. I have relationships with far more than that. I maybe haven't worked with them in a work capacity yet. So being able to really go out and bring professionals from the industry in that have great stories and tell their journey, et cetera, is going to be, something I think that we're going to continue on and be able to bring more and more to. I also, if you recall, I've got 7 years of experience in the outdoor industry. I ran the dealer sales and service department for Black Diamond Equipment, which is a climbing and ski manufacturer in the outdoor industry. And that translates to all these other relationships in the industry that I continue to have. For example, one of my old climbing buddies and work mates is Ryan Gellert, the now CEO of Patagonia. So being able to kind of pull from those people and get some interesting stories and things like that to come to the podcast and deliver, I think is going to be a big component. The next item, number 2, would be we're really going to focus on driving and continuing to drive the trip giveaways.
Nice.
With my business in Dupafish, there's much more of a parallel approach there because Dupafish is an online booking platform. And I'll selflessly plug here. If you go to www.dupeafish.com, that's DUPEAfish.com, you'll see we have a newly launched online booking platform that really helps service providers in the industry spread the word about their offerings to the audience. Okay. And so my relationship with all those lodges is also going to facilitate our ability to bring some amazing trips over the next year in giveaway packages, et cetera. And we're really excited about that. And that's a global business. So we're looking at some really unique places we go. So very excited about the trips. And that's a big part, right? One of the things that I always loved about the show was your ability to kind of give back to the audience, right? So we're going to continue to give back to the audience in that manner as much as possible. And then the third item is really trying to help the audience with topic series approach. So one of the things I really want to kind of dive into and bring the right kind of contacts in is in relation to various series of topics. So, for example, I thought about, doing some things around, okay, let's get some people from nonprofits in here that can talk about, conservation and cleanup and things like that. In fact, Dupafish is getting ready to launch a huge contest around cleanup. That's nice. a global-based contest, so it's going to be awesome for that. And by the way, there's a free trip for 2 to Alaska for that. So that's going to be really cool. Some things like, hey, we're going to get CEOs from the companies in our industry on the call, interviewing, talking about what's important to them, what's important in their business, and how that applies to our audience. Some really cool stuff around photographers. I know photography is really cool and fun for a lot of people, but also hearing their stories on their travels and what they do, those kind of things. Book writers, influencers, business executives. So I'm filling with a bunch of different series type approaches so that we can really give the audience not only the ability to relate to an angler from the angling perspective, but how to relate to them in secondary and tertiary ways in their life as well, and then taking value from that. And then the last element of it is I'm going to ask every person that we interview to share their rig and tips on how to fish their favorite rig so that we can learn some tips and tricks in every episode.
Nice. I love that. That's awesome, buddy. No, for sure. Sounds like you guys got a good program that, you know, you're going to go ahead. I'm so glad you're keeping the lodge program or the trip giveaway program. I mean, that, oh man, that is like something when we created that program, that is like so unique to, it's so the insider. It works in so many ways. Like you have no idea like how amazing it is. It works for the lodge owner. It works for the audience. It works for one lucky or two lucky winners. It's just so cool. I'm so glad you're going to keep that and continue on that path for sure. So, and hey, hopefully, I can't wait to listen to where you listen and watch to see what you guys do for sure. So, like I said, I'm a little choked, lost for words right now. So I'm gonna kind of hand the mic over to you, Christian, because only because it's emotional. You know, I'm a little teary eyed. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, no problem. I think what would be kind of fun is to hear from you.
Okay.
A little bit, because your audience has heard you over the last 3 years interview others, and they get to know you, but I don't know if you've necessarily ever been really interviewed. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I haven't. I did interviews with 1 year when I was at IFTD, just about the podcast. Just plugged the podcast actually. So, I think the last time I talked was my first episode when I talked about myself. And man, 3 years ago, no audience. This kid from Canada comes out and built this podcast, really, right? I mean, that's kind of what it was. I'm like, hey, I know like 3 people in the fishing industry. I can do this podcast. So
yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I suggest people it's crazy. So what do you guys want to know? I mean, I'd love to answer your question. I mean, basically, most people do know a few things. My day job, I am a ventilator nurse. So, with COVID and stuff like that is really, really added to me. I mean, granted, I didn't have any COVID patients on a ventilator. My job was to keep the patients that were on a ventilator 100% free of COVID. Otherwise, it would be devastating. So that took a lot of my time. And I mean, you remember the month of March when we were talking and stuff. I mean, you know how hard I am to get on the phone and everything like that. And even for this episode, so a lot of my time was chewed up with working and how much I'm working. And I mean, it's crazy. So, I've been up to a lot of work, a lot of nursing.
That's a lot to take on.
Yeah,
I mean, it's been hard on all of us, right?
Yeah.
But when you're living that and going into a hospital and seeing patients, and then I'm sure you're privy to all kinds of information that most people aren't, and that emotional baggage, it's got to be rough. Tell me a little bit about that.
You know what? The emotional baggage, I hate to say it. I leave work at work, and I've been conditioned for that now. I mean, nurses are sometimes like people think we're unemotional. We're empathetic. We're not sympathetic. And at first I didn't know what that meant, but I mean, it does come around where it's like, people say, hey, I've been just newly diagnosed with ABC. And you're like, no, I hear you. You never say the word you understand because you don't. And, you sit there and you empathize with that person, but you don't say, oh, you poor soul. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Because you realize, the course of what they've been diagnosed with, of where they're going with it. Do you know what I mean? So, if it's MS or something like that, like there's no cure, right? Something like that's the stuff. So you got to roll with that. It's kind of challenging. It can be taxing, especially to those new grad nurses for sure. The biggest thing is we're working short. We're heavy. We're busy. The nursing. We haven't had a break. We haven't had that. When the world shut down for 2 weeks, we never got that. We haven't been on vacation in over a year up here in Canada at least, right? We're wearing. We're still wearing masks and in some cases respirators for 12-hour shifts, and our faces are still beat up from that. And So it has been taxing. I mean, in that regard, yeah, that's some of the stories that, I can tell without like losing my license for confidentiality, but that's where we're at. I mean, I come home, I got a great family. My wife's a nurse as well. She works in the operating room. So, I come home, I got a great family, super supportive of my family. I mean, heck, dude, thank you. I'm spending way more time with them now. The wife is really happy with that. So, that's kind of good. I mean, and then to try and put out this show, actually, to be honest with the audience and then you, I mean, to doing the nursing and then coming home and doing an interview or 3 like that on your day off, like your 1 day off that week, it's like, okay, I got to bang out like 3 interviews, edit them up and then post them. So I got 3 weeks worth of content here. That has been my life for the past year, really. So it's been hard, right? And then trying to keep the social going and all that sort of stuff. So, that's kind of where we're at. I mean, long days, and who wants to work? Who wants to do a podcast interview and edit an episode after a 12-hour nursing shift, right? Not too many people. And I've been doing that because, I value the audience and I value what I've started and created here because it's so amazing. And it is rewarding to do that. And it's so funny, like no matter how tired I am, dude, like getting on the other end and talking with my guest, like I don't even feel the tired. The energy that they give me just pumps me right up. So it's cool. I love talking to people. Anyone that knows me in the industry knows, like, so they start texting. I'm like, fuck it, I'm calling them because I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? I'm notorious for that. Like 2 texts in, I'm like, I'm just calling because I just like to talk.
Mm-hmm. I do know, and you kind of roll back. I think that's why you and I have such a good friendship, is when you say to me, this is my job, and do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I can relate. I mean, a lot of people in this audience might know, but 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, and I lost 90% of the functionality in my left lung. So I do know. I know what it's like to have an empathetic nurse and those late nights where you can't sleep or you're afraid to go to sleep and that nurse is by your side. So for all your patients, I'm going to say thanks, because whether you know it or not, you made a huge impact on them, because I've been impacted immensely by nurses. So kudos to you and your wife for being able to do that, because there is a certain amount of that you take home. So good on you. And then I get it too, right? I get pumped talking about fishing. I get pumped talking to these guys and the pros in the industry, the guys that aren't weekend warriors like us and can give you the tips. And then when you have a little nugget, you can share with them. I mean, it's just exciting. I mean, we're duping fish, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Feed-rearing fish. Yeah. They're feed-rearing fish. How hard can it be? It's immensely difficult for some reason, but we're doing it. So there's something about when you hook up and that rod starts bobbing and the line shaking that just gets you feverishly excited. And I'm looking forward to talking to a bunch of people just like you have, and building those relationships. So Greg, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
Why did you start the podcast in the first place?
Great question. I started because I wanted to learn about the industry. I wanted to learn about brands. I wanted to learn about guides. I wanted to provide a platform that was equal and showcase like these people, the history and where, you know what I mean, where these brands started and the struggles in order to inspire new and upcoming. And that's why I like you taking over, is because you mentioned, one of the things that you wanted to do is get those new companies on, right? And I always had a philosophy, I had a rule. It was like you had to be minimum 1 year in business before we ever like talked, right? Like minimum, because there's too many fly-by-nighters. But what's it called? So interviewing like say Winston. I mean, there's 75 years worth of history. Scientific Angler, 75 years this year. Right. So the history of how it started, started making, ABC and, Loon, for instance, like that was a great episode. I didn't know this, but Loon made like rods and reel. They made everything they possibly could put a logo on, you know what I mean? Before saying, whoa, like we have like way too much inventory. So getting those stories and sharing those in hopes to inspire anyone that's out there, another rod maker, another, products or service that's in the industry, using those as an inspiration and as a platform to keep going and saying, hey, we believe in you. The industry needs it. Fly fishing can only grow. That was the other thing too. I always made sure that we were totally, inclusive, not exclusive. And I wanted it to grow and one of the coolest things that I did know when I started to where I was is I saw the rapid growth of fly fishing in the women's market. And, and I spoke to so many great women on the show, Heather Hodgson, Jen Ripple, Paula Shear, like so many like pioneers that are just like fantastic, and they're so supportive of it. And I learned like so much from them and the direction that they, from the challenges that they started. So it's just so cool to get that out there and then highlight those stories as inspiration to other women so that they can get, introduced to an amazing sport. I mean, I still fish all the time. So, yeah, I love it. So that's one of the reasons. It's probably the main reason why I started, and it sort of just evolved from there. You know what I mean? Like everything morphs. Yeah, everything morphs. Like it became bigger than I thought.
I was going to say, how did it morph?
How did it morph? Well, I mean, it morphed into
I was going to say, how did it?
So my first year, I was like absolutely like no advertisement, and I got this. I can do it without advertisement. And it's so funny because like, dude, I can't stress enough, without the advertisement, there's no freaking show, because I funneled it my first year. And I literally, from my savings account, said to myself, hey, I just spent a year, or a massive, nice family Disney cruise or trip on a podcast that I received zero revenue for and got no work and, nothing in return. I'm like, this can't be sustainable, because my wife is kind of mad at me for taking money out of our savings account to spend on something that didn't return money. So It's so funny. So again, like, that first year to the second year, when we did our trips and our giveaways, so creating that program, it totally morphed, and then looping into the sponsorship. And that was where it was key. That's where I sat there and said, man, this thing is now sustainable. Having those sponsors and showing, working with quality sponsors was like my number one thing too. When I worked with sponsors, like they had to be someone that I used, had to be someone that I trusted, had to be someone that we backed, right, for sponsorship.
Yeah.
Like frig, man, my audience, I would never sit there and say, go use this, if I didn't use it or believe in it. And I was firm on stuff like that. You know what I mean? We essentially, I mean, everyone.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Because you would call me and go, so-and-so wants to sponsor the podcast. I don't really think it's the right fit. What do you think? I know people have different perspectives in my audience, and they use different things, but for me, and we would always talk about that. Like, yeah, if it's not the fit for you, man, then you can't put your brand on it. You can't put your name on it.
Do you know how many times
Don't do it. It's not worth it.
Do you know how many times I'm like, but they're paying so much, like way more than my other guys. And I just don't need any more free fly line.
The next 6 months.
And I don't need another. I don't need another awesome lamps and reel. Like it's just like crazy, right? It's like how much fly line does a guy need, right? And it's funny, right? And yeah, like I said no. I did. I kept that authentic. It was super important for me to keep that authentic, and work. Believe that. And for you, and I know you know a lot of players in the game as well, and sponsorship for sure. It's super important. I mean, it's the only way the podcast is going to grow, and it's key to the growth of the show. Is key to keeping it going because it's something in the reality that I quickly learned having the show was like, if it's not sustainable and you're not making and it's costing you every month, eventually you're going to sit there and say, fuck it, like straight up. That, there's no other way around it. So having, the audience believe in the product, for the trip giveaways and bringing on like, hell man, we gave away a raft. We gave away a River Rat raft. Okay. And from that raft, like he reached out and we're like, yeah, okay, we'll see what we can do. We had a Winston rod. We had a Bauer reel or a Lamson reel. What else is there? Scientific Anglers stuff, like Rock Treads, like all these great brands, just like, hell yeah, we'll throw in. Next thing you know, we gave away over $10,000 like prize pack to someone, dude. Like these are just through the sponsors, and they just generously donated that stuff. And It's just worked out. And those are the sponsors I've always maintained, and those relationships, and said, hey, let's do something on the show. And, having the audience go to those sponsors, shop on their page, support our sponsors is so freaking key, both to the show and to you. And doing it through the show is even better, man. What I mean? It just works, right? It's the way to go. And following and showing up and following the sponsors on Instagram, following, Dupafish, following the Insider, like that's key, right? So that's something that we definitely, we learned a lot of really quickly when, stepping back. That was a good experience. So
also, I mean, those things, it sounds like a little thing to do, but you're right. When our audience goes and follows us on social and the various channels, et cetera, when we reach out to our sponsors, it's them excited. There's engagement, there's more of an audience, et cetera. I mean, it's a business. Well, let's not kid ourselves. It is a business. So
yeah,
I appreciate you acknowledging that, because that's going to probably help me down the line here.
You know what? I made a lot of hard decisions. My first year, it was a hobby. Let's be honest. It was a hobby. And then when I sat there and like literally, like I said, a cruise line for 4 around the world on a Disney trip is what it cost me, and software and this and that and equipment. Like, it keep going, doesn't matter. But that's when I sat there and said, I can't do this every year. I need to figure out a way. And you know what else we did too is the trip programs. That really, 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 provided a foundation for a solid business, and a solid business that, like, other podcasters might be able to get an ad on there, but everyone knows the Lodge program belongs to the Insider. So it doesn't matter you know what I mean? And the cool thing with the Insider's Lodge program is it works. It's tested and it works. We've tested it numerous times. Unfortunately though, what's it called? Due to COVID, which is another reason why I had to withdraw here, is I mean, we had so many trips. I think I lost 9 trips in the past, 18 months, just world trips, like trips that I could have given away to our audience. 3 to Mexico, was it Costa Rica twice, Belize, Alaska twice. I mean, what was the
Chile?
Yeah, Chile. The one I was telling you about. Yeah, I'm like, hey, I can't go. You know what's so funny? So I had a trip to Belize in February, through Lamps, and I literally phoned up like 10 people, and I'm like, hey man, do you want to go to this trip in Belize on behalf of the Fly Fishing Insider? Like, here's all you got to do. I can't go. And I offered it to 10 people, and so many people were like, yeah, I'll go. And I know one guy, he's like, oh, my wife says if I go, I'm going to get divorced. I'm like, well, you better find a good lawyer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do, right? So, we have eventually, Lamson kind of took that over, and thank God, right? I mean, because we had that on the books, and I really wanted that to work out so bad and to go. But, with our travel restrictions, like, we're still restricted here in Canada as I speak. I mean, it's just crazy, right? So that really put a stake through my heart when your business is so reliant upon that. And that's what the Insider was. Those are 9 world trips that we could have given away to listeners, man, and followers of the show. Hey, nothing makes me happier than saying, here, you want a trip to Belize, you want a trip to Mexico, everything's covered. By the way, here's $10,000 worth of gear. Like, hell yeah. Right.
Yeah. So what is it you think that you're going to miss the most about the podcast?
Oh, the audience, dude. Yeah, the audience, the feedback, the good and the bad. They're like, hey, your audio sucks. Okay, cool. So I went and upgraded my audio. Thank you for costing me more money. But that's just...
Tell me a story. Tell you a story about how you connected with an audience member and how it was rewarding. I want to hear that.
I think the biggest stories that I can say is when we first did our very first trip giveaway, man, that one still hits me to this day. Like, so we did it with All Alaska Outdoors, and it was me and Forrest Rogers from Rock Treads. We just came up with this thing and started working it, and then he took over Crazy Creek. He bought that out, and then so I kind of worked it and massaged it into the Insider. But I remember phoning up Ethan, I forget his last name, and he was a high school teacher out of Colorado, and we were like, so hey Ethan. He's like, hey, who's this? And we're like, so did you enter a contest? He's like, yeah. And we're just like, so you won. And literally, like, it's like, hello, whoa, like, is there just like just a tear, like the satisfaction, and I've had the joy of like literally phoning. I know a young girl out of Washington, Taryn Blake or Taryn Graham, I can't remember her Instagram handle. But she phoning her and say, hey, you want a trip to Canada? I guess she can't even get up here now, but hey, you want a trip to Canada to the Stillwater Lodge? Like, you know what I mean? Like this, and having her cry and scream, like this ear piercing scream of a girl on the phone, like you're just like, crap, man. You know what I mean? So those are really cool. Like that is such a high. And to this day, like, you remember what, you know, how Oprah's like, you get a car, you get a, like, dude, like, honestly, like, you get a car. You get a car. Yeah, like, you get high off that shit. You get high off that, man. Yeah, it's like, man, I you know, it's a trip of a lifetime. And that's why, like, man, you know, I hope this Chile thing does, because you're going to, you know, if you can give a trip to some dude in Chile, like, or girl or whatever, man, some listener, like, world class fishing, world class trip of a lifetime. Like, most people can't be in a position to do that.
Even fathom it. Yeah, can't even fathom it. Right.
And you get to give that to them.
And man, that like few minutes of pure excitement and joy on that call, it covers all the tears and anguish of all those that didn't win. But the good thing is they're going to have plenty of opportunities and maybe go get another one. So,
well, for sure. I mean, you're doing it. So cool, I mean, that's the insider for sure. I mean, so that's definitely one of the ways that we've connected really well. I think the other way is, you know, you getting these new people that are like, hey, I'm just getting started, or I want to do this, or you know, other people like, hey, thanks so much. You know, I love it. You know, love what you're doing. Actually, you know who's really cool, who recently reached out, I guess about a month ago or something like that, was Sven Diesel. Like, everyone knows him. He's like, yeah. And he's like driving around in his truck, and he's like, Greg takes a picture, I guess, and he's like, love what you're doing. Like, you know, awesome shows. And I'm like, thanks, dude. Like, this comes a lot from, like, you know, fuck, like, he's a great tire, right? And, you know, we had him on the show too, right? And, you know, he's like, he's a fan of the audience, and you're just like, that's awesome. You know, like that's the stuff. Or people like, you know, reaching out. I know, you know, I had people reach out when on a positive and a negative, when I did that recently, when we did the Purist interview for Purist on the Fly. And, you know, like, I had a lot of people that are, you know, they were upset about that interview. And, you know, I'm like, hey, listen, man, you know, we're inclusive here. We don't have room for hate, and that interview wasn't about hate in any way. And having to sit there and say everyone has a voice, and, you know, directing, you know what I mean, where, like, why that person does what they do. I wanted to get that story, and yeah, okay, it's a bit dramatic and stuff like that, and, you know, they're all about canceling tailing gloves. You know, that was an interview too, like having that interaction with the guests, you know what I mean, or like the listeners, was, you know, something that needed to be said, right? So, you know, getting that out there. I mean, you know, we're not always going to like what we always hear, right? So,
yeah. And I thought that was really cool because, I mean, I know you're taking a risk, right? Alienating some of your audience.
Dude, I took a huge hit on that. You know, personally, I guess for those that don't know, like, I took a big hit on that. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm disappointed. Like, why are you supporting? And I'm like, first of all, we're not supporting. We support everybody, right? At least when I had the show, I supported everyone that was trying to do something. And, you know, his mission was to educate. And how he presented his education is how he presented his education. And you know what's funny? I actually literally do not know who I interviewed. That's freaking cool. I'm like, what's your name? He's like, I'm not telling you. I'm like, what is your name? He's like, I'm not telling you. He's like, it's Purist. You can call me Purist. I'm like, are you freaking kidding? So it's kind of cool. So, yeah. And, you know, I get it, right? Like, you know, I have a great conversation. You know, I had many conversations with this person, and literally, like, you know, that interview, you know, a lot of people are like, you're supporting that. And we weren't. Like, what we're doing is we're highlighting what they're doing. He's calling people. And I said, let me ask you this. What's the majority response? He's like, you know what most people don't see is when we call someone out for, like, using tailing gloves or something like that, they sit there and they say, I'm so sorry. He's like, 90% of the people, and it's in the interview. He's like, 90% of the people are like, I'm so sorry. I didn't understand the effect on this, on the fish. Thank you for educating me. I will take down my post. Can you like leave it alone and stop? Like, and it works. And then you get the 1% or 3% of the people that are like, F you, I'm doing what I want. I don't care. Come find me. He's like, fine, whatever. You know, you want to go step on reds or snag reds, go for it. You know what I mean? Like we're going to call you out on that. Everyone knows it's wrong. Right. So that's one thing. So it's kind of cool, but having that interaction with the guests is really what I like. And sorry, with the audience is really cool. Speaking with the guests, I mean, hell, man, I got some of the best stories and best conversations and relationships.
Let's hear it. All right, give me a good story about somebody you've interviewed that you really build a relationship with.
Oh shit! I mean, well, but I mean, like again, getting back.
Yeah, but this is my first interview.
Okay, you know what? Forrest Rogers. Check out that. So here's a great interview. So I had All Alaska reached out to us and was like, hey, Greg, like we'd like to work with you. Come on up here, blah, blah, blah. So I had a buddy. I'm like, hey, I found my buddy here in BC. I'm like, hey, we're going to go to Alaska. He's like, yeah. And all of a sudden, like, a week later, sorry, can't do it. I'm like, what do you mean? It's free. It's like a trip to Alaska. Like, I need you there. We need photography. We need all this sort of stuff, right? And, long story short, he's like, I got to work. I'm like, well, phone in. I don't know. Like, it's a trip to Alaska, right? And I'm like, you know what? I don't have time for this crap. So I guess like a couple weeks prior, I reached out to Forrest and we talked like an hour and a half, like after air on the phone. And I'm like, hey man, how's it going? He's like, good. What's up? I'm like, well, I know we don't really know you that well, but I'm like, I felt like we had a good vibe and shit. I go, do you want to like come to Alaska with me and fish? He's like, and I'm like, it's covered. He's like, yep. So, you know what I mean?
And then that's sorry to interrupt. Yeah. At that time, Forrest was only rock treads, right?
Yeah. He was
moved on.
Well, he still owns rock treads. Him and Scott still own rock treads. But I mean, now he's done so well. He owns that Crazy Creek, the chair company. Holy crap, man. Printing money.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what's it called? So we did that and we just had this relationship. Fuck, I remember like we talked again, just like me and you, like every day, like on the phone. Who else is there? Like Jeff Liskey, like all these like Joel Dickey, phoning up Joel Dickey, like down in like in Carolina. Like, hey man, like we're gonna do this thing, and I want to bring you on board. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'm down, man. And like the Costa Rica trip, I was like, you should come to Costa Rica. Like, we'll see if we can get you on there and teach, tarpon. I never fished, tarpon in Costa Rica. He's like, oh, like just like these off-air relationships with so many people that transpired all through, meeting them and hanging out and talking. You know what I mean? And just the community support. The coolest thing with the fly fishing industry, 100%, the coolest thing is the support with each other and the brand support and stuff like that. And one of the other coolest things that I really like about the fly fishing industry that not a lot of people know is the major brands really support their shops. Like, there's no affiliate links. Try and find affiliate links for like Scientific Anglers or something like that. Like, this just doesn't exist, and it's not gonna, to my knowledge, at this time, it doesn't exist. So it's so funny because like having them be like, no man, we gotta support the shops. We gotta sit there and that is giving me such like admiration for the industry and the way that they still support the businesses and the anglers themselves and the anglers going and having that human connection with the shops. You know what I mean? Like having that. So that's really cool. Those are some stories, some quick stories there off air.
Yeah, and there's some great things to learn from your local, shops and dealerships.
Shit, yeah, man.
Like you can't replace that, man. You cannot replace that knowledge.
If you're going to go to fish, say you're going to come up here and fish still waters in my area, if you do not stop in at Trout Waters, you're missing out on like 90% of the, and you actually go and you talk to the kids that work there and you talk to the owner. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to say, hey, so yesterday they were hitting on here. Here's the hatch. Here's the top 5 colors this season. Boom, boom, boom. Like they've just given you 60% of the knowledge that you need, right? In advance.
Yeah.
Before going fishing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or ask them like, hey, what's the lake like? Okay, well, you want to, typically this shelf, and this shelf are pretty good. Do you know what I mean? They're not giving you the spots. You still got to catch the fish. There's no spot burning or any of that. But I mean, it's the same thing. You go to a shop in Colorado or Utah, and I'm like, hey, I want to go fish. Like, if I'm driving there or flying there or whatever I'm doing, I've always maintained, if you don't stop and talk to the shops and get the right flies, and you're just using a generic thing, man, you're losing like 60% of your knowledge. These guys will tell you, like, you know what I mean? Shorten up your leader. Do this. Here's what they're hitting. Yesterday was that. Oh, the water's blown out. That's another great thing. Oh, you're going to go steelheading? Don't bother. It's blown out today. Go wine touring instead. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, right?
Yeah.
Like those are key factors.
It is interesting because, you know, a lot of business these days has really moved to e-commerce.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have some sponsors, you know, they're e-commerce.
Yeah.
Shops. I mean, Togen's Fly Shop.
Yeah, great shop.
E-commerce shop online. They do great business. So I think one of the things we've kind of maybe taken for granted or has fallen off the back is, hey, they're an e-commerce shop, but let me tell you, they got a huge customer service department usually.
Yeah.
Call them up, talk to somebody else, gain some knowledge from them.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys talk to people all day long about fishing. So, you know, take advantage of that.
And one of the cool things too, and let's talk about Togens for a sec, because it's great. So I mean, Justin that owns Togens, fantastic guy. You know, one of the coolest things is when you talk about like an e-commerce shop like that, he only specializes in selling material. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't sell rods. There's no rods in his shop, right? I know there is rod shop people that do, you know, that portion of, but that's a great example. So he's only niched down on one specific thing, materials. If you're tying bugs, bang, which gives you that freedom to tie your own, you know, your own patterns or whatever you're going to do. So it's kind of cool how he's recognized that and said, hey man, like, you know, what's that?
There's a lot to learn there too. I mean, you want to know what kind of grade of hackle to get. I mean, you can blow money on fly tying. I'm sitting in a spot right now. I'm surrounded by fly tying materials. And I could tell you when I first started, I mean, I just went out and bought things, thought I need this, I need that. Half of it I don't even touch because I just didn't buy the right quality or, you know, didn't have that advice. And that's huge. It's huge.
That's right.
So, let me ask you a question. We dove into a few things. You going to continue to fish?
Yeah, of course, buddy.
I thought the answer was yeah.
Yeah. No, of course. I'm not giving up fishing. Like, come on, that's like my lifeblood. You know, I am. It's hot right now too, and it's so funny because I'm like 1 or 2 days off here, and you know, yesterday was spent transferring a bunch of files, and today's a podcast with you here, and you know, I think it's pretty much a workout, and then I'm back to work. But when I am fishing, and you know, I'll be fishing in the spring and the summer actively, like for the Stillwater, because that's the most productive times, right? And I guess I think when I'm not fishing, I'm taking up like fitness. I'm like on this huge fitness kick, and in wine, my friend, my wife and I are actively, you know, spending more time together. So we're visiting wine tours and doing that sort of stuff. But to get back to it, yes, I'm gonna fish. I still fish. I actually just bought a new boat this year as well. My oldest boy, Braden, he's completely getting into fishing. We're getting the foundations of casting down, and you know, watching those indicators sink. So yeah, definitely, chronomid fishing is my thing, and Stillwater fishing's my jam. Everyone knows that. So love Stillwater. Huge growth in the United States right now is Stillwater fly fishing.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Stillwater fly fishing, you know, we did a big push for that with Dupafish a year or two ago. Tons of lakes. People don't take advantage of them. I think, you know, one of the difficulties is not necessarily knowing how to fish them or what type of rigs to use, et cetera. So it can be pretty tough. Actually, while we're on that, why don't you dive through like, hey, this is how I look at water when it comes to Stillwater, and then this is how I run my favorite rig. Yeah,
okay, for sure. So, I mean, basically, you know, nothing new here, and I'm going to repeat what Landon Mayer and I talked about before on one of the episodes of the Insider. And there's 3 components to fishing, like new Stillwater and stuff like that, and that's like drop offs, intersecting points, and like, you know, rocky shoals or something, like structure, right? So you're going to want to definitely target those areas. When I talked to Brian Chan on the guided series with Scientific Anglers, again, not the best audio. Thank you, audience, for letting me know. It was during COVID, and we had to record near a highway. What is it? Oh yeah, I'll tell that story one day. But basically, was it? So we talked about the same thing. Brian talked about it in the tips that he mentioned on that show to me, which I follow as well. Or having the right anchor system, having a sound finder, and you don't need a fish finder for finding fish. Like, where the fish are, because that it's, again, in structure, intersection points, and drop-offs, right? So that. So with that said, basically, you want to double pontoon, you want to double anchor, pull up. What else is there that we want to do? You want to make sure you have like floorboards in there. You talked about that. All good stuff for your boat. For me, the key thing is having the right lines, especially for indicator fishing or naked line fishing for Stillwater. Again, really cool. Oh man, I want to like naked line fish out in Pyramid Lake. I think that would be like phenomenal. Anyway, so my setup for that is obviously I run. Everyone knows I use Scientific Anglers. So straight off the what am I using this year? Last year I used the Amplitude Smooth fly line. This year they sent me, was it the new Stillwater fly? What was it? The Infinity. I can't remember. I'm drawing a blank. It'll probably come to me in a second. But I use their new Stillwater fly line that they sent out, and it's phenomenal. Casts like amazingly, super smooth, and it works for indicator fishing because you got those indicators on there, which are just so, so heavy. What's it called? So you have an indicator, you could have up to like 18 foot of leader. So we'll start with the fly. So I have my Chronomid at the bottom. I go up about 12 inches, and then I put a little split shot. I usually use those little Loon camo drops. From there, I go up to a swivel, and that whole line will be about 8-pound fluoro. Again, Scientific Anglers. That from my swivel up to my line, like up to the fly line, will be about 10-pound fluoro. I always use fluoro. It drops my fly faster, keeps it in the, everyone knows it sinks better, all that sort of stuff. And like those fish they're cruising, they're swimming. You want that visibility, all that. Especially when you're fishing like a little, size 12, 14 Chronomid, in some cases like 16 and 18s, right? And then I go straight to my indicator. To the line. So I don't do the leader system that often unless I'm like fishing like 9 feet of water or less, right? Like 6 feet of water. But usually that is 100% my most successful system. I always put a split shot on there, and I always put a swivel on both. The swivel from SA as well. There's those little micro swivels, super, super tiny, super good. You want to keep your fly like that little Chronomid. If those that don't know what a Chronomid is, same thing as a midge, right? So you want to keep that right at the bottom of the lake, like a foot off the bottom, hence why you have that sounder. So I mean you're doing that, and that's the setup, man. That's the success. I mean, I go out, we slay them, it's a great time. Teaching people that setup is like huge. That's the big difference between catching and not. So, and then knowing where the fish are by using those 3 key components. I mean, most people think fish are in the middle of the lake when that's not always the case. They got to be deep. Yeah. Right? So many mistakes. They got to be deep. Actually, more fish are caught in like shallow water because they cruise the shoals, right? They're cruising around in the weeds and all that sort of stuff. Looking in those weeds. So definitely.
Yeah, that's always been my big go-to when it comes to Stillwater, is looking for, like you said, structure, right?
Yeah.
And structure can be defined in multiple ways. Is it a shoal? Is it grass beds? Is it logs? Is it rock outcroppings, etc.? And if you just kind of start and aim with that to begin with, you're 75% of the way there on identifying where the fish are going to be. And then, like you said, there's people don't know, but there's all kinds of current situations in Stillwater.
Exactly.
And then once you start to understand that, man, it's just like a compounding effect. The thing that I love so much about Stillwater is the quality of fish. I mean, these guys are cruisers, usually eating high protein or tons of chironomids. So you get these big old monsters on a regular basis, man, it can be super fun.
Oh, I know. And you know what's so funny? Like the biggest fish on the smallest fly. It's crazy. Like people don't realize that. Like you get the biggest fish on the smallest fly. And you know what? I remember it's the Andro that I'm using. The still like that's like a fantastic line. Definitely if you're going to get into it. And it's so cool. You know, Stillwater's like, and I've seen down in Washington and Montana, it picking up. I remember, you know what? It's funny. Here you are, a little off air for you. I interviewed Hillary Hutchinson, and I'm like, "Hey, Hillary, how's it going?" And she's like, "Well, you know, waiting for the rivers to fire up and stuff like that." And I'm like, "So what are you doing? Are you fishing?" She's like, "You know," and it was COVID, right? So like, she's like, "I don't really have any clients because you know the guiding was everything was shut down, and it was that period where like no one knew what was happening. No one was allowed to be with anyone except for like your partner, right?" And she's like, "So." I'm like, "So what do you do?" She's like, "You know, I'm actually out here like stillwater fishing." I'm like, "Really? Are you?" And she's like, "I'm not good at it, but I'm getting there." I'm like, "Man, we got to stillwater fish together." And she was just picking up, but you know, Hillary not being good at it is probably like, yeah, she's slaying, but just not slaying as much as she would on a guiding trip. So it's just kind of funny, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
she's got some good waters up by her, like Hegden and whatnot. I mean, there's some really nice still water up there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the lakes, but I mean, there's great water up there. I mean, there's great. You know, America's covered in great water. You guys have great water as well. You know, and still water fishing is you know definitely a thing to do. So yeah, I mean, so to get back to it and circle back, yeah, for sure. I'm doing a lot of fishing still when I can. I'll say that. How's that sound? Which isn't that often.
Yeah,
so.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad to relieve some of your time so you can go out and enjoy yourself, get more fishing in.
You know what, I am
family,
too.
Man.
Yeah, no, I am too. I mean, my wife is super happy. She's like, "Holy crap, you're not a miserable prick anymore." And those like literally are like, it's verbatim right there. You know, because the stress of, you know, creating a weekly show, and I did it for everyone needs to know, I did this for 3 years solo. Never missed it. I think I missed one episode in 3 weeks, and that's because I was at IFTD. And I regret that. I'm like, oh, I need to get an episode out, and you know, like, so that's the only one I've ever missed, which I really don't count because it was still work, and I'm still interviewing people, and I got video, and I did video, you know, for all the awards at IFTD, so it was really cool. But and I do hope to go this year if they ever let us leave this. You know, Canada. They just want to keep all our tax money here is what I'm thinking now. I'm just kidding. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, it's just, yeah, I'd love to go with you, man. Like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to go there and do that with you. So
sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
We'll do that, and then we'll go fish our tails off for the next few days. That sounds awesome, man.
Definitely.
Well, Greg, I got to say, I'm sure it's bittersweet for you. It's really sweet for me. I'm excited to move forward, and I hope the audience really got to know you a little bit more today. And anything else you want to add before we go? Yeah,
just, you know, I know you're the man for the job, and I want the audience to know that as well. And when I went through looking at who all was interested in this, you know, you definitely, you're there. So I want them to recognize that, you know, I support that, and I'm loving what you're doing. I know I don't want to ruin it for people because you've shown me what the direction you're going to take this, and I know you're going to do way better than I ever did. So that is cool. You know, I think, you know, you got great connections that are going to, you know, do good. And you know what, audience, I definitely cannot thank you enough. You guys have taught me so much about myself, so much about, you know, what it's like, you know, just in so many general ways. You just taught me so much about everything, and I thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, definitely for everything. So definitely follow Christian, support Christian. You are supporting the show. You're keeping the legacy of what I built going on, and yeah, it's just truly amazing, everybody, and thank you. So,
well, I appreciate all the kind comments, Greg, and I'm sure your audience does as well. And some reassurance, you're going to be back on here, bro. I'm sure I'm going to need a fill in here and there, and I want to kind of get back together with you in like 6 to 9 months and see where you're at. And I know you got some things brewing, and
I do
we'd love to hear from you again.
I do have that new business, and it's not fly fishing related, so everyone knows. Yes. And you know what? I would love to come back, man. Like, if we can, let's see if you can get, who did I want to interview that I never got to interview? Because man, we interviewed some of the top people. Who would I like to, I wouldn't mind talking to Kristen Mustad again. That was a fun interview. He was such fun. And he was one of my first ones early, but if we could get someone I'm drawing a blank. I'd like to get the what's it called? Who did I want? I wanted to always get TFO. I did want to do TFO because I wanted to talk to them about their Stillwater rods, and I wanted to get them on the show. I'd love to jump on that one. And yeah, I mean, hey, there's some good people in there. And if you get Forrest for Crazy Creek, I'll jump in as a surprise guest.
Surprise, yeah, exactly.
We'll ambush them.
We'll ambush them, trap them.
Yeah, it's funny.
Sounds like a play.
Okay, buddy.
Well, cool, man. We'll definitely look at getting some of those people. I know you'll have some more time to think about that.
Oh,
we can chat.
You know what?
We really want to get.
It was Oliver White. I've been working on trying to get Oliver White and Indie Fly and all that on the show for quite some time. It was definitely Oliver White, and I was just like, man, I need to get this guy. And like, I didn't think my schedule matched with anything. His schedule don't match with anything, but I've been trying for 3 years. So Oliver, if you're listening, please help me out. So, all right, Christian, it's all yours, buddy.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it, man. Looking forward to it.
No worries. Thank you. You've been listening to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, tell us by liking this episode and subscribing to the show. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. See you next week.